Welcome to the new season of the Rockpile Podcast. My goal is to build up and edify the body of Christ. And I'm your host, Deborah Harper. So let's jump in. Well, hello. And today I have Julie Rowland, and she had a trip to Bulgaria, right?
Yep.
And we're going to talk about this. This is an amazing thing. What made you go back to Bulgaria?
Okay, so my first trip to Bulgaria was 1995.
Yeah.
No, 93, right after communism fell. Since then, I've gone probably well over 20 times.
That's amazing.
Often, for many years, it was every year. I'd go by myself once in the year and take a team again in that same year. So I've been there a lot. And
At
through
least
that,
a couple
I've
times then. Yeah.
built incredible relationships. I don't have acquaintances there. I don't have friends there. I have family there.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And I have a whole group of sons and daughters that are like they're between my grandchildren and probably closer to my children between them. And they're in their 30s and 40s.
Yeah, yes.
And they were young teenagers when I first went.
Yeah.
And so it's been, a long time. And I think it was 2014 was my last trip there. And because God then opened other doors throughout the world for me to go to.
Yes.
But they've always been in my heart.
Yeah.
And I've always kept in touch with she was one of my first translators, maybe my first interpreters.
Yeah.
And she's now a U.S. citizen, and we keep in touch, and occasionally we've met.
There you go.
Different
That's
parts.
fun.
So we've been talking.
Who was your team this time?
So this time my team was that translator.
Yes.
My oldest granddaughter, who's 33, and my oldest grandson, who's 31.
There you go.
And myself.
Okay. Yeah.
And my granddaughter had been there 3 times as a teenager, and she's been wanting to go back. So we've talked about the last couple of years. When I turned 80, she said, "You want to go on a trip, Granny? Where do you want to go?" I said, "Well, let's go to Bulgaria." So we've talked about it on and off for a while. So she always wanted to go back as an adult. So anyway, so we've talked about it. And ever since COVID, when it shut everything down, after everything opened, I started planning to go back every year.
Yes.
I'd planned to go back. And I fell and broke my arm, and I fell and broke my leg, and I had COVID and got sick and all this different stuff. So
all that.
every time I made plans,
the enemy was good
wasn't
at
the
messing
right.
it up.
Well, I don't think it was the enemy. I think not that God made me do those things, but it wasn't his plan. It was my plan.
Wasn't the time.
I needed to go back and see my family.
Yes. And this is true because we can do that.
Yeah.
We can just push our will to do what we want to do, but that's not always God's plan.
Exactly.
So that's good that you have that perspective.
So last year in the spring, I did a Bible study at my church called on Elijah.
Yes.
And how God took him to the dry riverbed, and then years later took him up to live with the widow, and he just got darker and darker and further away from what God had in mind for him to do. So that's it opened my eyes during that time to all the plans I'd been making. And the path was I had to learn a deeper part of the word surrender.
Oh, okay. Yes.
And I was so... I would say I was almost angry that I wanted to go back to Kenya and I wanted to go back to Bulgaria. Those are 2 of the places that I just have a special, I love all the places I've been.
Yes.
But these are places I've gone back repeatedly. So, so in that, somewhere through that whole session, God just kept breaking me. And finally, one day I remember sitting in my chair at home, and I just said, "Okay, God, I surrender. If I never get to go to Kenya or Bulgaria again, I'm going to be okay."
There you go.
And I had to say it out loud so I could hear it.
That's exactly right. Yes.
And I knew in my heart,
yes,
okay, I'm going to be okay.
And that, your analogy with Elijah, I think that's exactly what it was. Is he was surrendering his will to God's, because he clearly heard him. Because he fed him at the brook with the ravens. And then when he went to Seraphath, I think it is, something like that, then God provided. He told him there was going to be a widow.
Yeah.
And so God always is a provider, always.
Always, yeah. She
Yeah.
had little oil and enough for one loaf of bread, and then
Yes,
they were
yeah,
going to die, she and
yeah,
her son.
yeah.
And but God provided for them for what, 3 or 4 years, I can't remember. So, but so through all that, it just like that was a very amazing study for me because he broke down me
Yes,
in
yes,
many ways. And
yes,
so, but that was a real thing. I just said, okay, I'm okay. I'm going to be okay. If I never go back, I'm going to be okay. I've had an amazing life. And within a few, maybe days, definitely weeks, the first phone call I got was from my old pastor in Ohio who does mission work, he and his wife.
yes.
And he texted me and said, Catherine, his wife, and I are planning to go to Bulgaria this year. Any thoughts?
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
or something
Basically, do
like
you want to
that.
go
He
kind of
said,
thing?
I'm
Yeah.
making a 3-way. And he also had just recently, he and his wife, been in contact for another circumstances with our interpreter,
Oh, okay.
the first one.
Yeah.
And she's now a U.S. citizen, lives in New York and all that. So for some circumstances, she ended up reconnecting with them too. So anyway, so he said, I'm making a 3-way conversation between us all. So 3 hours later, his wife calls me and says, hey, listen, Paul and I have been talking. Any chance you'd want to go to Bulgaria with us?
Yes.
2 days later, the interpreter contacts me and says, hey, I'm going to be in Bulgaria in the fall. Why don't you come join me?
Yeah.
And I said, have you talked to Paul yet? So
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
so through that, we had this group going, and we were all going to go to Bulgaria
There you go.
in the fall.
Yes.
And I'm just like, I was ecstatic, and I thought, God, how you open doors. So I called my granddaughter and said, hey, we've been talking about Bulgaria in October. Are you in? She said,
Yeah.
I'm in.
Oh, isn't
Because
that
I was
nice?
supposed to go to South America with my brother, but no, I'm in. So anyway, so this is,
That's
I
awesome.
love how God works. So anyway, so now we started talking, and our interpreter contacted the pastor there, and 2 days afterwards, the pastor's wife there already had a women's conference plan for me because every time we went, we always did a women's
Yes.
conference.
Yes.
And she says, okay, the first Saturday we're doing a women's conference.
I love it.
So
I
anyway,
love it.
so the wheels were rolling.
Yes,
And
already.
Then a month later, I get a phone call from my pastor at night, and he says, okay, I'm going to leave you a message here because I didn't answer. He said, I was in my prayer time and just came out of my prayer closet, and the Lord made it very clear that Catherine and I are not to go this year.
Oh.
Please call me.
Yeah.
So I called him in the morning, and the first thing out of his mouth was, oh, I'm so sorry. Are you still going to go?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
said, of course. He said, oh, good. I was so worried you wouldn't go.
Yeah.
I said, no, I'm going to go. Sorry. See you later.
Yeah.
Well, they were going to stop there. They were on their way to Nepal. So they had
Yeah.
decided they would just go to Nepal, and it was just too much to. Anyway, so that's how it began. And then in the midst of all of this, I get a text from my oldest grandson who walked with the Lord as a child, but has since walked away.
Yeah.
And so he texts me, and the text said, hey, Granny. Now, he lives in Ohio,
Uh-huh.
and so he hasn't talked to my granddaughter or myself in the last few days. He texts me and says, hey, Granny, if you ever think about going back to Bulgaria or Kenya, maybe I'd like to go.
Oh, my gosh.
And then he said, oh, it's probably missions and you wouldn't want me.
Oh.
Are you kidding me?
Oh, that is
So
serendipitous. Look
I
at that. I love
contacted
it.
him the next morning or that day or whatever, and I said, of course I want you to go.
Yes.
I've been praying for years for a photographer and a videographer.
Oh, is that what he is?
And that's what he loves to do.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
To go with me to record the history of our ministry.
Yes.
Of course I wouldn't want you to go.
Yeah.
And he's like, really? And I said, yes. If you just go and do what you do.
Yes.
And that's what he did.
Oh, perfect. Perfect.
So,
well, tell me about when you stayed there.
So when we stayed there, we ended up, the church had built a 4th floor that had, I think 5 separate bedrooms and 2 bathrooms for visiting guests when they come.
That's nice. Yes.
And so that was the first time that was available. So that was great. So we both, my granddaughter and I had one room, my grandson another, and so
Yeah.
they had a whole setup where you could sit and with a table and chairs and
Oh, good. Yeah.
have a microwave and coffee and things like that
Yeah.
in the mornings and just talk and chill at night and pray and whatever, And so there was also a young family there. They said, "Well, they're sorry, there's another young family up there with a little 3-year-old." And I thought, my first thought is, "Oh, great," because I don't speak Bulgarian and they would speak Bulgarian and whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, but it ended up they were a young family and they had a 3-year-old boy they were so delightful, and she spoke good, decent English.
Oh, good. There you go.
Yeah. So, and their little boy, they had a 8-month-old who was in the hospital and he was 10 months, whatever. Anyway, he'd been in the hospital for 5 to 8 months.
That's so
Since
hard.
he was like 3 months old, he
That's
had a
so
major
hard.
crisis, and they lived in a village, and they'd come, and this church found out about it and gave them a place to stay as
Isn't
long
that
as they were
amazing?
there.
And this is the church that you saw built, right?
This is a church I saw built. This is a church that, when communism fell, this pastor had a underground church of 90 people during communism. And when it fell and suddenly the gates were open, there was a massive revival, and they had outdoor crusades, not this church, but throughout the city, country, where thousands were coming to Christ.
Oh, that's
and
wonderful.
There was such a revival, and the young people were so hungry.
Yeah.
So he went from a church of 90, and I might have my facts wrong, but basically to a church of 1,000 in 6 months.
Wow. Fast.
And he had not a clue.
That is so good.
So one thing that happened was when CBN and Regent University in Virginia, Christian college, they went into this is my understanding, every former Soviet Union country and said, pick your 2 best candidates and we'll give them full scholarships. We'll provide all their expenses. We'll provide the airfare, their housing, food, everything to come and graduate from a regent.
There you go.
So, and they went to the churches at large. I don't know who they contacted in each country, but somehow this young lady, Helga, was picked. She was an engineer. I don't know if she'd graduated as an engineer, but she had been recently either in school or soon out.
Yeah.
Engineering. So she was one that got picked. And Christmas that year, all the students were going home to she wasn't going anywhere because she couldn't afford to go back to Bulgaria for a few weeks or months.
Yeah.
So somebody in her dorm said, "You're coming home with me." So she lived in New York, Buffalo, New York. So she took her home, and her pastor, my pastor needs to hear your story. So she said to the pastor in Buffalo, "Please come and help my pastor because he has all these," and mostly young people.
Yeah.
Like young 20s and stuff like that. And they were on fire, these young people, for Christ.
Yeah.
And he had no, communism, you have no leadership skills. And any of these skills you had have long been killed. You can't think for yourself.
Yeah.
You certainly can't make a decision. And so here was this guy just overwhelmed. And then, of course, that causes problems because you have people that have leadership skills but don't know what to do with them. And they come in, and then there's heads butting, hey, whatever.
Yeah.
And so my pastor took 2 people from his church, and they went over and met him and said, "How can we help?" And they were so moved in their hearts. They came back, and that pastor was in a group with my pastor.
Oh, okay.
And so now I was head of women's ministry in my church. My pastor and I were friends. We'd known each other for years. And so he went to this local meeting that both of these pastors were at, and he brought the Bulgarian pastor to this country. So he took him to that meeting where he said his story and pleaded for help.
Yes.
And so my pastor, now neither of us, we always supported missions, but that wasn't in our hearts to do at all. Either one of us. We'd never been on a mission trip or anything. So my pastor said, "I got to go help this guy."
Yeah.
So he came back to our church, and they had one woman to go, and they needed another woman to go. So they had it in the church bulletin.
Right.
on Sunday.
Right.
And my husband saw it when I brought it home. He said, "Oh, this looks interesting." And then that Tuesday, I had a meeting with my pastor. So at the end of the meeting, I said,
Yeah.
"What about this woman who's going to Bulgaria?" And he said, "Oh, you know somebody?" I said, "Well, maybe me." Great. So that's how I got to Bulgaria the first time. So I went home and said to my husband, and he had no information. I had no information. So I get home and I said to my husband, "What do you think of me going to Bulgaria?" He said, "Okay, where is it?" I said, "I haven't a clue." So we got in those days, we didn't have Google. We got the globe.
Yeah.
And we found Bulgaria. And he says, "Oh, okay." And he said, "Well, when are you going?" "Well, I don't know. Sometime in the next month or two." "Well, how much is it costing?" They don't know yet." "How long you be gone?" "Not sure." We had absolutely no facts. And my husband said, "Okay, you should go." But, and this is interesting because my husband was not a believer at the time.
Yeah.
And so I said, "Okay, thanks, but I need more than that." He said, "What do you need?" I said, "I don't know." So 3 times during that day, he said, "Oh, that's good. You should go. I think that's." And every time I said, "I need more than that," but I didn't know what I needed. He worked in the afternoons. He was walking out the door. He put his head back in the window and said, "I think you ought to go. You have my blessing."
Ah, that.
And I said, "That's what I needed." And that's the first word I have to bring, I think. When God calls you to do something, if you're married, you need to be in agreement with your spouse. And for women, we can be very hard-headed. I could have pushed my way through with my husband. But somewhere, somehow, the Lord put in me, you're not going without your husband's blessing.
That's right.
And for many years...
Unity is just vital. Unity is vital.
Yeah. And if you go... This is just my opinion, but if you go without your husband's covering, you are opening yourself up to the enemy. That is a door you don't want to open.
That's right.
Because mission trips can be very hard.
Oh, yes.
And in some of these dark countries, there is witchcraft and all the curses put on you, all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I guess that's the first warning the word says.
Yeah.
Don't go. I was just meeting with somebody yesterday and talking about this very thing. Come under your husband's covering.
That's right.
We're not servants of our husbands.
No.
We don't have to bow down and curtsy, but we do need to come together as helpmates.
That's right.
And that's how God created us.
Yeah.
Your strength, his strengths, and they come together and make one.
Because there's Christ, then it's the head of the family, because he's the spiritual head of the family. Then that covering that you're talking about is the fact that he's covering you in prayer. He's going to be praying for you. He's giving
I don't know if he'd be praying for me yet. Yeah, we didn't have that. But if he's a Christian, he'll be praying for you.
But at least you had the blessing.
But I have the blessing.
The blessing to go.
And that was huge.
Yes.
And I will tell you, I've probably been on 40 trips all over the world.
Yeah.
And I've never gone without my husband's blessing.
Oh, that's perfect.
And one time he asked me not to go with my third trip to Bulgaria. And it turns out within less than probably 4 hours, I ended up being signed up to go to China to take Bibles in. And that's another whole story.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's because my husband said, "I don't think you need to go this time."
Yeah.
But
that.
When China came up in a few hours, he said, "Okay, that's good."
Yeah.
It's like, okay. But I know God used him.
Exactly.
Anyway, crazy stuff.
Now, back to Bulgaria. So what else happened that was unique and fun?
So in Bulgaria, one interesting thing that I know this was a gift from God, that I'd had 5 major interpreters in my time in Bulgaria in all those years. And I ended up, every one of them interpreted me this last trip.
Oh, my God.
At least some place. And that was amazing.
Yes.
The last one was the last village I went to. And she just showed up in a car and said, "I heard you were here and I had to come." And it ended up interpreting me at that.
Isn't that nice? Oh, my gosh. That was sweet.
That was like the icing on the cake.
Yeah.
So anyway, so we went. And, I am frail. I can't, jump and run and do all those things. I use it.
But you can still preach the one thing that the Lord had given you.
I did sitting down.
Yeah.
We did the women's conference, and I said, "I think I need a chair."
Yep.
And then that was the first thing I did. And after that, we went to different churches, and my granddaughter made sure there was a chair there, and I said, "No, I don't think so." And after that, I stood for an hour and did my
God just
preaching or
built you up.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, without the chair. So, so I actually got stronger,
Yeah.
you
You
know.
did.
But the thing is, a lot of connections. And my grandson said to me, we were talking yesterday, and he said to me, "Granny, the one thing I saw was how much you're loved.
Yeah.
And you not only love them, but they love you back." And he said and he said, "Uh, here you're an old woman and you're frail, but you still came. What that meant to them." And he said, "Excuse me for saying that, Granny." And I said, "Yeah, well,
You know,
that's
the
the truth."
truth. Yeah.
And so when God tells you to go, you go, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to get a little bit stirred up that I may just be able to go back to Kenya. I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to plan anything, but I'm just,
That would be good.
gosh.
So,
Yeah.
what in the conference, what did you speak
So
about?
the conference, I asked my granddaughter. So I said my granddaughter, who'd spoke as a teen, she'd spoken at many churches for like
Yes.
5 or 10 minutes. So I said, "Now we're doing a women's conference. That means you're part of it." And she said, "Okay." I said, "You'll probably do one session." "Okay." So I said, "What's your favorite scripture?" And she said, "Well, that's easy. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path." Proverbs, I think 3:5. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, she said, "That's what I want. I want to give my testimony."
There you
And it's
go.
a powerful
Powerful.
testimony.
Powerful.
And
Yeah.
and what she struggled with in now her life
Yeah.
in her 30s. And so that's what she did. And every church we went to, she would turn to me and say, "I'm going first. I'm going first."
I love
mean,
it.
she just came alive.
Oh, that's
she
awesome.
loved it, and she was so out there with people. And so anyway, so that was a conference, and it was just a blessing to be able to even do that.
Yes. Yes.
So people say, "Well, what do you talk about?" I don't know.
Yeah.
I have
The Father's love.
I make it absolutely. So how do you trust him?
Yeah.
You surrender.
That's it.
It's all about trust and surrender. Can we trust him?
Yes.
I'm doing a small group now, and the 2 statements I say every day, and I said, you need to know this. Number 1, in the beginning, God.
Yes.
In the beginning, God.
Yes.
And the second one, God so loved.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the 2 things. If we get that so in us, but it's not God so loved you, God so loved the world. God so loved me. And that's one thing. It's like we need to take all these scriptures and promises and say,
own them.
This is for me.
Yes.
Make them personal.
Yes.
Years ago, somebody told me the love chapter, what is that? 1 Corinthians 13, I think. He'd say, don't say love is, say Julie is.
Yeah.
I'm patient. I'm kind. I'm,
Yeah. Yeah.
God is. Anyway, so that's a sidetrack.
That's okay.
So anyway, the conference was great, and saw a lot of people that I recognized and a lot of new people. That was good. And through that, I ended up, and then I preached on Sunday, and he always loves when people come. So he always says, I love when people come so they can preach. That was the first church I ever preached in.
Yeah.
And my own church didn't think women should preach.
Yeah.
And years later, when my pastor asked me to preach in my church, I said, are you kidding me? And he said, no, I told the elders, you preach all over the world. Why can't you preach in your own church? Anyway, that's another whole story. So anyway, we did that. And then we went to connected with churches I'd been to for years, many, many times. And then watched how they've grown.
Oh, then that's exciting. Yes.
I mean, another small town church that I watched them as they go from a rented room to building their own church, and then now they've planted another church and built that, and how God orchestrated this whole trip. So now in Bulgaria are some friends of mine who were missionaries from Switzerland when I went to Bulgaria years ago.
Oh, okay.
And then they went back to Switzerland. I ended up staying with them in Switzerland for a week one time. Now they're back in Bulgaria, and they're in the same city where that little church is that built. And so
Yeah.
we spent a whole day with this who was Swiss and the two pastor and his wife, or
Yeah.
the Swiss couple and them. So just all those little things, and we got to see things in the country we'd never seen because they wanted to take the young people to sightsee.
Yes.
And so there was part of that. We went to some caves called the Eye of God,
Oh, really?
which were amazing. And big, in the middle of the cave, a big hole up in the top where the skies. Anyway, I didn't get to go there because it was too dangerous a path for me. But anyway, so what some of the the highlights were just seeing people every day,
Yeah.
getting to do a lot of personal one-on-one ministry, as people
Yeah.
would call and want an appointment for different things.
You know what I hear? I hear a woman who has gone to Bulgaria and gone to these different places. You've made relationships.
Yeah.
And because God is a relationship
Exactly.
with us, you're giving a relationship to them so that you can pour into them, love on them, encourage them. And you've been able to do this for years.
Yeah.
And that is building the kingdom of God. You might not say, oh, that's not grandiose. It is grandiose because it transforms people.
Yes.
You've got somebody who who cares for you, who they're coming in and they're truly investing in you. And
that's what I say about missions.
It's so amazing.
If you go once, that's nice.
Mm-hmm.
If you go back, that's okay. Now they're starting to take
a little notice here.
Notice, maybe you really care.
Yeah.
You go back a third time now.
Yeah.
Now they know you care.
Yes. I get that. It makes sense. That's why it's important to be able to go over and over and over. And you're not extremely wealthy. This is something that God always just pays for. I'm
not wealthy at all.
Yeah. So God just always pays for it.
He does. And even this trip, I said, okay, how are we going to pay for this? And in the past, we've written support letters to people we've known in our churches and whatever. And people have supported me for years. But God he shows up in so many different ways. It's just like,
he just does.
If you're called to whatever it is, he will pay for it.
Yes. Yes.
If we walk in trust and faith.
That's right.
Okay, you call me to do this, so you got to figure out how I'm going.
Show me what I need to do because we need to get there.
Yeah, because that's one of the number one excuses. Well, I can't afford it. Well, neither can I.
You look at your limitations, and you're not looking at God.
Yeah.
That's right.
My husband and I have been on the same income for 20-some years that he's been retired and I've been retired.
Yeah.
We get Social Security and a little pension.
Yeah.
But God, that doesn't matter to God.
It doesn't matter to him.
To do with it? So anyway, that was one thing that came up right away. I said, how are we going to pay for this? Because most of my supporters are either dead or moved and I've lost contact.
Yes.
And they're in different positions now than the last time I raised money. And then I have a very small ministry. It's a 501k or whatever they call them.
501c3.
Whatever it is. And so I called the treasurer, and I said, we're planning this trip, but I got to figure out how to raise money.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I know we've got something in the treasury. Do you know we had just enough for the team to be paid for? The whole trip to be paid for.
Oh, my gosh.
And I realized that I had, just before COVID hit, we had planned a trip to Kenya, and we had raised funds.
Oh, that's right. You mentioned that.
So I thought it was for Kenya. It was for Bulgaria.
Yeah.
Because then we couldn't, something happened and we had to cancel the trip. And I contacted the donors, every one of them, and said, I need to send you your money back because we're not a ministry that has money.
Right, right.
Just for that. And then we do. And every one of them said, I think, maybe one didn't, but most of them said, just keep it for your next trip.
Yes. Yes.
And so I forgot about it.
Yeah.
But
God didn't.
Hey,
isn't that amazing? That is so good.
I've had situations where I was invited one time when I was going, and I was like $600 or $700 short. I can't remember now.
Yes.
And it was like the week before I was leaving, and one pastor I knew, acquaintance, and he said, "Will you come to my church next week and tell your story?" So I did. So I went, and then at the end, he took a collection for my trip, which was really great. And then a man came up to me and he gave me his phone number and he said, whatever you lack after the collection, you
Yeah.
call me and there'll be a check for you.
Oh my gosh.
So 3 days before I left, his wife was at my house with a check for $400 some.
Isn't that amazing? So let's end on that. That is amazing. God provides.
Yeah.
All we have to do is step forward, believe, have that faith.
Right.
It's faith.
Yeah.
And like you said, we have to surrender to his will.
Trust and
It
surrender.
is not about us.
Right.
It's about the Father.
Yeah. And that could be, if your mission is to go to your neighbor.
Yes.
I reached out to a neighbor a week ago.
Yeah.
Who we're friends because we feed feral cats in the neighborhood. Yeah. And so we're real friends about that. So, and she's a neighbor. But anyway, so she's been having health issues similar to what I had a few years ago. So she came over and we were talking, and she had some tests this week, and she was very, very concerned. And I said, you know, I'm a Christian. She said, yeah. I said, may I pray for you? And she said, okay.
Yeah.
And
she's
we're walking,
ready now.
And
yes.
we're walking, and I said, no, I mean, can I pray for you? She said, that'd be nice. And I said, will you give me your hand? She said, oh, now? I love when I offer to pray for people.
Yeah.
I said, yeah. She said, okay. She gave me her hand, and I prayed. I just prayed that she would have peace in this test she was going through, and that, that God is in control, and that, there would be good reports. So she texted me a long letter, and she had her tests on Wednesday. I guess, what is today, Thursday?
Yes.
Okay, it was yesterday. She had her test and wrote me last night and said, oh my gosh, the person that read the test, they told me this and this and this. It was all good report.
Oh my gosh, thank you, Jesus.
So
take the opportunities when we have them.
Yeah.
You got to take the opportunities.
So maybe he won't send you to Eastern Europe, but maybe he'll send you to your neighbor door, or somebody in the grocery store. Just, I heard a woman say years ago, and I've always remembered it, keep your spiritual antenna up.
That's right.
Always watch. If somebody's sitting there and they look a little distressed or something, just go over and say hi.
Yes.
Are you okay?
Are you okay?
And may I pray for
you'd be surprised how many people want prayer. Yes.
Yes. In all the years I've done that, I had one person say no.
I've had a couple, but most people say yes. They're kind of surprised, but they do. So we're going to end with that.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Julie.
Thank you.